Salutations, my fellow Braves. I am Trudy Rash, and this is the presentation I have constructed to discuss the social psychology concepts involved with and utilized by the United States government while training inductees into the armed forces. First question would be, why did I choose this image? And I chose this photograph because it impacted me, because I have a son, a niece, and a nephew, all in the United States military. They have shared some of their experiences in basic training, through advanced training, and deployment through personal stories, and I feel that these are great examples of how the person perception and the social self evolve secondary to the military's psychosocial concepts and their epic version of manipulating the self perception of identity, the expectation, and self fulfilling prophecy in turning out United States soldiers. Particularly here in this photograph, you will note the persona of the drill sergeant with the angry face, the veins popping, and leaning in to make his point very clear. This needs no explanation. They are visual cues and lead us all to believe that he has a very important point to make. And part of that is that he is in charge and what he says definitely goes. So, where am I going with this? Well, you need to learn a little bit about my journey with Aiden through the United States Army as a prelude to my point. As a mother, the most terrifying thing that can be said is, "Oh, mom, by the way, I'm joining the US Army in a forward combat position 2 weeks after I graduate from high school." Well, crud, my mind went blank, and I mean really. The main things I struggled with was how was the Army going to change my son, personally and professionally? Would he lose his individuality? How will he fit into the world now and after his military career? The photo depicted here is my son Aiden, who just turned 18 2 weeks prior to being inducted into the United States Army. He attended his basic training and advanced training at Fort Sill. He then attended jump school at Fort Benning in Georgia and was picked up by a rapid or quick response team in Anchorage, Alaska. His transformation over the next 9 months has been astonishing. He went from a sloppy, unathletic, unorganized individual with a very creative mind to someone who is regimented, particularly about his appearance, dependable, and a very capable soldier, all in less than a year. He did maintain his individuality, but his methods have changed to a more socially acceptable manner fitting the U.S. Army's expectation and preferential ideology. The use of psychology within the government shows that they have reasons that they do the things that they do and understand exactly how to accomplish their task of generating defenders of the United States Constitution and the American population. I will explain how the military utilizes these social psychology concepts and the principles in training soldiers. I will present theories, applied concepts, and definitions of the behaviors exhibited by the military and their structured social climate. The United States flag is something that draws people in, their attention, their respect. It is something that unites its people. It reminds us of the freedoms that we do have that so many others do not. This flag represents the social group of American citizens, and it's symbol of the sacrifices and the accomplishments of the military, as well as civilian populations alike. So, why are impressions so important? The definition states that this is an automatic response and can be harmless. These impressions determine how social interactions will go. The example of the flag reminds us that we have certain freedoms because of a struggle, because of a sacrifice, and that's what commands our respect. Also, that we belong to a unique group of people and that we are dedicated to those main concepts, even though we are different and unique individuals. Out of chapters 5 and 6 of our text, these are some of the key concepts that are interlaced with my discussion today: impression formation, the halo effect, cognitive bias and labeling, the Pygmalion effect, wishing something into reality, which is also called self fulfilling prophecy, the nonverbal and verbal communication, the culture of the military, attribution, cultural expectations, the human experience, and changing of attitude. One key concept of what influences our impressions, particularly in the United States military, is the halo effect. To inspire, you first must lead. This is where one trait, physical or personality related, is the base of judgment and the only trait that produces a personal impression. An example of its significance in military training would be the drill sergeant. One might single out the thundering sound of his or her voice, clearly marking their authority, or the distinctive way that he or she wears the uniform, which signifies the pride and position that they hold. This commands respect, order, and gives an impression of the head man or woman in charge, and could be considered a central trait. And it resonates throughout the platoon, signifying that all see the drill sergeant in this way. It also ignites a self fulfilling prophecy of those under their command to strive to be better, to assimilate to their new social group, to buy into the belief, and this is called an attitude change or an inoculation. This is where a soldier buys in to the agenda. On the reversal, an example of a new recruit with a slouched posture might give the initial impression of laziness, prompting the sergeants to focus on an extra training for that recruit by making an example out of him or her. This would be to ward off or discourage any future insufficiencies. This is also an example of cognitive bias, where there may be a misconception of who that person truly is based on past experiences of the drill sergeant making a snap judgment. Through verbal and nonverbal communication, such as affect or facial expressions, we are able to make impressions quickly during encounters and alter the course of our actions accordingly. Note the aggressive stance in which the drill sergeant takes here with the trainees. She is nearly identical to the first picture of her male counterpart at the beginning of this presentation. This is called uniformity, which is an important point here, that collectively they're wanting to turn out a group of soldiers that are very similar. So therefore, they must be similar. Everything that they do, including nonverbal cues and verbal communication. In the text, it refers to a Mays bright or a Mays dull classification when dealing with how adaptable mice are to a maze. This adapts to the reconditioning of these citizens as well. Some adapt well, and some do not. The positive and negative feedback from the drill sergeant in these cases are used for behavior modification. It's much like the idea if you build it, they will come, but a military version, much like elite athletes. If you set the bar high, then they will rise to the occasion and fulfill their potential. Let's talk a little more about the communication and the theory of planned behavior in regards to the military. Many will say, why the screaming, the yelling, and the continuous bombardment of instruction? Through intensive immersion into a new culture, repetitive verbal and nonverbal communications from a drill sergeant, a recruit can quickly learn to adapt like the mouse to his or her social surroundings and the new pecking order that is established within the military. They are conditioning these citizens and civilians to learn to take orders without question. This process is also known as de individualization. It is defined as the loss of identity or self awareness, usually in a group setting. It is effective because, according to the text, apparently even thoughts of temporary social exclusion make us particularly sensitive to cues from others. This seclusion means, of course, the failure and possible expulsion from the group that they now feel is their new family if they don't measure up. Ultimately, the goal of the military is to tear down the walls that were built during adolescence and with childhood experiences, and to rebuild with a new set of rules, a new self identity that is strongly centered to the military's ideals and accomplishments. This new social group holds a high level of expectation and camaraderie since they are much more alike now, bound by a specific purpose and duty that they were not associated with prior to their training. They are now one the same and are illustrated here to the right. Once basic training is completed, the sense of accomplishment also boosts the ego. And the meaning behind belonging to an elite group such as this, having met the extreme cultural expectations that only approximately 1% of the US population has ever successfully accomplished. Here, the cultural expectation is that everyone has a specific job and that their training supports this, and it's partly the theory of planned behavior. The military can approximate that these soldiers will behave in a certain manner because of their intensive training. The military culture is very different than that of the typical civilian social groupings. It is hard for civilians to understand these methods and the transformation that occurs because of this immersive training and conditioning. The phrase that is used in 5.4, you weren't there, you don't understand, is true, for it is impossible to measure someone else's experience, including mine. I would like to thank everyone for their time and attention to this application of social psychology and how it is applied inside the United States military system of training and how it turns out its soldiers. Hope you have a wonderful day.